Wellness Show, episode 201. Welcome to the Wellness Show, a podcast on health and wealth. I'm your host, Tyhson Banighen, the founder of the Extraordinary Healing Arts Academy. Join me as we get the latest insight, tips, and strategies from wellness providers, coaches, and successful, heart-centered entrepreneurs, and much, much more. Welcome to the Wellness Show, and today we're going to talk about the healing properties of sound. And for that topic, we have Jill Mattson, who is a wizard in this area. I'm really excited about this because this is her passion, sound and color. Without further, let's have you introduce yourself. So Jill, who are you and how did you come to this area expertise anyway?
Well, since I was like 3 years old, I've been a musician, and music has always transformed my life. It's been very powerful. And in midlife, I went on a spiritual quest. I was rewriting the Bible, the Old Testament in particular, from the vantage point of God, like an autobiography, thinking that it looked very different from his point of view, in that we could say, why would God allow a child to starve? But God could say, there's enough food on the earth to feed you all 3 times over. When are you going to learn to share? So being very sincere, I started through the Bible and became very upset at the Old Testament. And because God was moody and God was this. And I came to an epiphany, which was that to me, God is love, and I'm going to search for the most beautiful version of love and God I can imagine, and nothing else will do. And so I had spent all this time doing this book, and it was kind of hard for me to realize that I was just so stubborn, and it took me a whole year to change my mind. And so I just was looking for another Bible. And I got into the Kabbalah and the old Jewish ways of looking at the love, of looking at the sorrow and the full consciousness and the attributes of love. And I was very fascinated. And shortly thereafter, I got into the great Sumerian mysteries because they were very much linked. And I'm still on this spiritual quest. And then shortly thereafter, I'm into the Egyptian papyri. And while I'm kind of on this personal transition of looking for the most beautiful, loving God I could even imagine, these people often talk about sound of music. And they would talk about sound like medicine, or sound for lifting rocks, or sound for changing people's virtues, or sound for curing, a lump or a tumor, or sound to make your garden grow better. And I was, being a musician at heart, I was like ecstatic. And I started to take notes. And I kept on this study for about 30 years of reading ancient societies, mystic societies, particularly paying attention to the music. And one of the results of this 30-year venture was that I wrote the book, The Lost Waves of Time. And in that book, I talk about how they used sound in the time of Lao Tzu, the Yellow Emperor, how the Hindus did it, how they use it like Ayurvedic medicine. I did chapters on how the ancient Pythagoreans used sound for curing and changing criminals, for rehab, for mental health, how how the Egyptians used it to lift rocks, to build pyramids. And so it started out as a personal spiritual quest, and it ended up as how sound was like a toolbox for everything, how the ancient people viewed the world like quantum energy, little packets, tiny bits of sound. And like you can look at water coming down the Grand Canyon, and it looks like it never affects those hard rocks until you look up at the canyon and you see this fabulous Grand Canyon, and you can see that tiny little bits of subtle energy over time changes all. And that's what sound is. And their superstition, their magic, it's all quantum energy, it's all quantum science that's easily manipulated through sound or color. And I mean, it just thrills me, whatever
Wow,
that's worth.
that's amazing. I mean, it's amazing because you did a whole historical analysis or historical search in your quest for a benevolent God, and it took you back to your passion of music and discovering that music, well, it's the food of the gods, isn't it? I mean, it's the music of the spheres. It's the basis
Absolutely.
manifestation.
Music can be
So,
used to heal your spleen, to put white light in your aura, to connect to higher beings. It can be used to ground you. It can be used to change your mood. It can be used to um, blast your kidney stone. Uh, it's really a tool for everything. It's accurate. It's free. It's cheap. You can use it again and again.
so I'm curious in your search and your quest to commune with those that have used the sound technologies before in ancient times. Did you have an opportunity to connect with the Hathors?
I have channeled, and I do channel. I have worked with them some, but I've worked with, I would say, more like a host of god and goddesses. The Hathors were
Right.
very big on sound, but um, so were all of them. Like I had a lot of sound-based techniques from Isis and a lot of sound-based techniques from Horus in the Egyptian pantheon. And as I went through, I found some of the secrets that Lao Tzu and the emperor were doing and how they were using sound to manipulate the elements and the weather. And you see people in our universities. Last year, I think it was a couple years ago, a couple students came up with a fire extinguisher that's sound. And ancient man induced rain out of the clouds. And so, you know, they were using sound to control the weather, but more importantly, they would balance the airy feeling in your body versus the watery versus an earthy or fire or your anger or your tension. And they would heal your body. And so, yes, I have
What you're
connected with the
saying, I think,
horses,
is
but
using
it's big.
or there's too much earth, or there's too much air, or there's too much fire, that the sound can be a way to bring it back into balance. Is that what you're getting at?
Absolutely. And the Hindus are excellent at that. They have ragas, which is kind of like a song. So they'll have a raga for allergies. They'll have a raga for this mood or that mood, for putting your baby to sleep. They'll have a raga for a headache. And they're using, in particular, the art of rhythms and in training pulse frequencies. And think of a shaman who does a drumming circle, and people kind of go into a fine state of consciousness where they leave their body and they have like a dream journey. But the Hindus are kind of doing like a brain entrainment with rhythm patterns. Another way to think of it is you go to the beach and it has wave in, wave out. And soon you're very relaxed because the wave pattern is taking you down into homeostasis. And it just changes your consciousness. And so the Hindus were masters at literally using rhythm patterns as medicine. Very effective.
Well, that's fascinating. Now, you were saying in the Tao that at the time of the Yellow Emperor that they were using sound. If I think I heard you correctly, where they were using it to change weather patterns. Is that what you were saying?
That's what they write about it. Not just weather patterns, but Lao Tzu writes about it. And they talk about that they had a department in their government called the Department of Measurements. And one of the very important things in their government was to control the length of instruments in the holes, let's say in a flute. they were literally tuning each one of their vast providences and their people. So they would believe that if you had, remember, there's no TV, no internet, no band up the street. All music in ancient times is controlled by the government in all of these countries. And so they're tuning their countries to be harmonious by the pitches, the only sounds they're exposed to other than that of nature. And they are, they're tuning like harmonious patterns to instill certain personality strengths into their own people. And then they kind of like hide this sound secret because it's power. Like even in the fighting of the Chinese, when you see the karate guys and they give a scream before they do a karate chop, well, they're literally going in on a certain pitch and vowel and harmonic sound to weaken that person's muscle. So the actual sound coming out of their mouth is precisely designed to weaken the enemy. So these were very powerful secrets, and they used them for controlling the elements. And it was also a symbol of power. Depending on how high you were up the pecking order, depended on how many musicians you were allowed, because they're a force to connect with the divine. And in the ancient Chinese, they would have orchestras like of 8,000 musicians, 8,000 musicians, and then they would play for long periods of time. And the idea that everybody could connect to the divine and bring down a quantum drop of power. And the numbers would make their country invincible. And I met this lady in Estonia, near Finland, near Russia. And she had talked about how they were owned by the czars and how cruel they were. And that they, when the czars fell, that they were so broken they couldn't get their freedom. But they had this ancient technique, the same as the Chinese. And they came together, there were 1 million people in their country, 500,000 got together and sang all day for 5 days or something like that. And within 2 weeks, they had their freedom. They literally altered the structure of their courage, their personality, their strength, their people. And then she talks about how in World War II, how Russia owned half and Hitler owned half, how they were forced to kill each other, how broken they were. And at the fall of World War II, they were again broken. They couldn't stand up and claim their freedom. And that they did another one of these massive orchestras. They did a sing fest, bringing in large numbers, singing for 5 days, and they altered who they were and went out and claimed their feelings. It's and she said that part of the reason they had these old customs was that they were, through the Druids, they were pervasive worldwide. And when the Inquisition came with the Catholic Church, wiping out the pagan customs, that they got very late up into those corners of the world. And people still remembered them and they still employed them. So there's a modern even using it. Estonia, where they're using this idea that the ancient Chinese had, that you can alter a people and become a powerful source through music.
Well, it makes perfect sense. I mean, I work with people at the individual level of their sound. I mean, you could describe it as sound. I help people strengthen their bioenergy field through, I guess, repetition. I help them clear their biofield by clearing what they don't want and installing what they do want, with the power of the word. And as their vibrational energy rises, then their ability to be possessed or harassed by other forces becomes less and less. So on the individual level, I know that this can, is extremely powerful, and that's how you can take back your personal power and stand in your truth. But it's exciting to know that you could do this you can do it at a cultural level, national level, you could do it at a planetary level, and that we could actually bring about change and transformation by literally coming together and singing it into existence or
and
chanting.
Also, one of the elements was in this very, very ancient thing was the angle at which a singer stood. So like when you look in the Druids, and if you were to place where they had their temples, they would be mocking sacred geometry or shapes found in nature. So they're going to make like a 5-pointed star or a 6-pointed star and have like singers on the stars. And so, and this was also true for the lifting of the rocks.
Yes.
And that they had to have like it's like sound was like a water pistol, and the angle at which you aimed your pistol was important. And so, like for in the example, in the lifting of the rocks, they had a certain sound pattern. They dig a hole underneath, and they would put the sound underneath the rock so it would come up like a fountain. And then they would sing the tone of the rock. Think of the opera singer singing a tone in the crystal glass breaking. Not any tone breaks it, only if she sings the tone of the crystal. And then energy transfers through resonance. So they would sing the tone of the rock, and they would pay attention to the angles and the shapes. So they would get power in singing in large dimensions, and dovetailing that with shapes found in nature. I mean, and that's how they place their temples, and they align them across the world, is to have like locations where they could send almost song back and forth to lift up an area.
So those harmonics, and the reason that they're all in the same latitude and longitude, then is literally like to create a harmonic accord where they're all singing the same note. So all those temples are interrelated and would actually, it seems like they would hold the light of the world in balance in some way. They would be able to maintain the energetics of the place, but also the planet. Yeah, that's very, very exciting what you're saying.
And then they would map them so that there would be like magnetic energy currents between them. So, they would have some of their temples or their singing points would be on an intersection of underground waterways, so that if you will, the sacred song, the sound, the music of the spheres comes down, and it would mingle, heaven and earth, if you will, and sink into the soil. Or they would sing in a temple, and the temples like Notre Dame, they all have wells at the bottom. They call them not sure why they call them a black virgin, but they have wells. So they're all connecting to underground water, so that the temple, like the antenna, spreads the singing. And then they also go underground. And then they're also located on intersection points of magnetic energy lines. So they're using sound and perhaps love or other energies, and they're kind of gridding the earth in a pattern to lift.
Right.
It's beautiful.
So it's interesting because when you're saying, I mean, all temples, Druidic and otherwise, in which the churches built their own cathedral of the sound, it becomes the carrier of that. So it's very exciting. So it also means that, well, let me back up and say, the positioning that you were talking about, well, where you are in the angle that you have towards the intention that you have, whether it was raise a rock or whether it's to open up a temple that's been shut down or to reactivate a matrix or a vortex, is really important. And William Buehler really talks about that in sacred geometry, where the role of each person in the sacred geometry, the exact role that they play, and I guess, and the notes that they sing in order to bring about the intention of the group. So this is ancient wisdom, but my feeling is coming back into the fore, particularly through people like yourselves, but there's others also on the planet that are body of information. So literally reactivate the sacred sites to do what they're intended to do is sort of the feeling that I get. What do you think?
I think that is a beautiful way to establish world peace. I think if you think about war, could you imagine hearing Silent Night on the battlefield? Right before war breaks out, music goes. Osama bin Laden forbid music.
I think they did that, didn't they, during the Second World War? on Christmas they started playing, singing Silent Night or whatever, and everybody stopped shooting and everybody was quiet and everybody listened. And
Right.
for those brief moments, humanity was even there on the battlefield.
Yeah. So do I think song and sound? And think about this. I know when I was younger, discrimination against Black people was so much worse than it is today. And I know that, I remember the busing when I was young and how unsuccessful it was. But then when you had Black singers, you had rap singers, and everybody liked their music, I felt that that was the single most thing that united people together as people to forget something as silly as skin color. It was the music, and in some cases, perhaps even the sports. But um, to me, when you embrace a person and their song, how can you go hate them or kill them? I think it's because it unites our hearts, it unites our souls. There's something deeper than our conscious mind gets. And so I definitely think singing and sharing music, it does things that we're not aware of that are very positive. Writing, it's well intended and thought out. Music can be used
Wow.
for bad things too.
Absolutely. I mean, I think that if we want to talk about the Matrix or the lockdown on planet Earth, and I don't want to go there necessarily, we do know that the Matrix is made up of energy that is, in some of it's in the frequency of sound. I mean, all of it's in the frequency of sound. Some of it we can't hear. So, but the antidote to it is exactly what you're talking about, is when people come together and love and compassion, and we sing the same song, whatever that song may be, and if it's coming from our heart, all that will dissolve before our very eyes. So to me, that's the way through, and it's a peaceful one.
Think of the word universe.
Compassion.
Universe, one verse, one song.
Yeah, absolutely. So I know you wanted to play some music on this show and give us some examples. We have a fairly poor sound connection, but maybe it's worth trying anyway, and maybe the actual music itself will clear up the technology, which sometimes, to be honest, doesn't have the ability to carry these higher frequencies, but maybe we can re-entrain the frequency of the web to carry the vibrational frequencies that we want today.
We can try. And also on my website at jillswingsoflight.com, there's samples of all of them that can come through quite clearly.
Yes, great. And those will all be in the show notes. So you're in for a treat, everybody. Those are all available to listen to if whatever we do on this show, the clarity we want, those will have all the clarity you could ever want. And they're all designed to alter consciousness or to bring about certain intentions. Isn't that right, Jill?
Mm-hmm. Yes. They're done through, there's many ways to heal with sound. You can heal with pitch, with frequencies. You can heal with melodies or sound patterns, like copying sacred geometry, for example. And the ancients had a way of taking numbers and making the numbers into cycles per second or sound. You can use sound for the physical body. I have sound that would tune organs, and sound that is akin or the same as the energy or the frequency of vitamins and muscles in your face and neck. So you can go out your physical body through sound. You can go out your emotional body through sound. I mean, who hasn't been to a movie and had the music track make them cry? You go to a very emotional music and you turn the sound off, the movie's dead. It's the sound that's playing your feelings. So I have music where I go in and take out your negative garbage, stuff pain that you've stuffed and ignored, and it is lodged in your body someplace, and your conscious mind's not aware of it. So, I go in that way. And then there's ancient techniques. There was techniques of dealing with the rays and beings on the rays, and I channel energies in with the songs. And I use light patterns, sound patterns, star patterns, ancient ways that they used for connecting to higher frequencies, higher energies, higher loving God, whatever. And so I have the whole gamut I believe, in my music.
So what you're that is frequency all the way up and all the way down, and some of it we can't hear, like a dog's whistle, and some of it we can hear, some of it we can taste, some of it we can smell, some of it we can access through our 5 clairs, some of it we can actually see, and some of them are just beyond all of that, but we still feel it on some level of our being. And so the frequency that you help people attune to allows them to be on the same channel of whatever that being is that they are wanting to communicate. So in other words, the angelic kingdom, that on the various levels is at a certain frequency, and one has to be attuned to that frequency for communication to happen. Either they're coming down to meet our frequency, or we're going up to theirs, or we meet in the middle. But it's like reading if you're not on that right bandwidth at the broadcast. Is that correct?
Yes. Yes, I have one called Contacting Angels and Masters, a little bit like a course. And I'm doing simple mathematics, and a lot of it is, one of my books was about the work of Sherry Edwards and bioacoustics. And one of the things I do is with her work, I go in and connect your body systems, typical illnesses, typical personality issues with frequencies or cycles per second, colors and pitches. They're really the same thing, just in different octaves. And anything transfers on the same frequency or an octave of a frequency. Octave's just the same note, like CC, higher or lower. So, and I so that you can think about if you want to work with, let's say you have a heart problem health-wise, it would be very healing to work with Kuan Yin, because her actual dominant frequency pattern is healing for that particular issue. Kuan Yin, her general frequency, her largest average frequency is that of pink. It's of the musical note C. And that is very healing for people who have heart issues, physical heart issues. So what I'm teaching in this CD is that when you have certain issues, there's going to be certain angels or masters that their very signature energy pattern is particularly good for your issue at that moment. It's not a way that we've thought of the angelic kingdom in the past. And then I go on in the CD and I teach people how to communicate and connect with angels and masters. I channel them, and you can feel their energy right in the MP3. So I put music like in the key signature, let's say of pink, and I'll channel all the pink angels and masters. So they have their energy print in there that you can absorb while listening to pink music and connecting with pink feelings. And then I go into orange, and you get into your Dalai Lamas and your Hindu gurus. And then you go into yellow, think of Jesus, and green, think of Buddha. Violet, think of Saint Germain. And so you can go through the color span, the ancient rays, and you can connect with angels and masters on a very high vibe just by listening. It's fun.
That's asked here by Kelly Jean McGreen. Oh, is that one on your site? And the answer is yes, it is, right?
Yes. Oh, yes.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, yes. Well, this is, I'm almost at a loss for words. I'm so excited by what you're talking about, because it's something I've known intuitively, but never met anybody who understands it with the detail that you do, and understands it on all the multiple levels because of the work you've done, the passion you had to. And I think it's really fascinating. It all started with looking for a loving God. I mean, for many, the God has been really quite dramatic for them, because it has to do with, servitude and getting it right, and hellfire and damnation. And one can get lost in that time and guilt and doubt, that, and which is really a burdensome path. But for some reason, you were able to understand that the God you wanted to deal with, and the only God, was the God of infinite love. So that became your guiding energy to take you through the history of civilizations, looking for where this energy of that type of being, of all that is, where does it reside and how to work with it. And here you've discovered that it all comes down to your passion, which is music. So what was your first inkling of that when you were a child? Did you have some sort of experience where you heard the music of the sphere, or did you have any sort of aha, or did it just come to you gradually?
It was my crutch. It's like I had, like many people, a very rough childhood at times, and I had a nervous breakdown at a young age, and my therapy was the piano. I mean, I'm primarily a violinist, but at that particular stage, it was Moonlight Sonata. It was I would simply play ethos. I would play my pain, and it was like it was a thread, and I had all this pain, and it was just slowly taking it out, and with continual performance and immersion in my own sorrow, sadness, whatever it was. It's like it was stuck in my body, and I was able to vibrate it, and it was able to leave. And it was purifying. It was what the Pythagoreans did. And my healing flower symphonies do that. I copied the Pythagoreans. I copied my own past, and I learned, because I even tested it in the nursing home, that people who are frozen, that are stuck, often it's too much negative pain and emotion that's literally in their body, and they can't move. And when I played pathos music, and they would sit there and feel, and the music would like vibrate it, and then it would pop loose. That's what the Pythagoreans were doing. They were healing everything, the body, through the lens of your emotion. If you could feel love all the time, then you'd be healthy, was the idea. And then when you got out of, it's like worry. Worry is a certain frequency, same frequency as the inside of your tummy. That's why you worry too much, you get an ulcer. You don't get a bunion, you don't get an earache, because the inside of the tummy is the same frequencies that ugly worry. So it all builds up there, and it gets stuck. So what music can go in, and it's just kind of like it's subtle energy. It just like it scratches it loose. And like in these healing flower symphonies, I go into your organs, different bodies, different parts, and you just take that crap out and you just pop it out. And then you transform the music into like impatience to patience. And then I put in frequencies of flowers and flower remedies. And so so we, take your crap out, and then you put in the good stuff. And in another CD, in Deep Wave Body Healing, I did it per organ. The music is a key signature of a healthy organ. And then I put it harmonic and harmonic tones. Both are healing patterns found within an organ, right in the music. And then I put like harmonics, which you don't get live in a digital. I put them in root notes with software. And then I go through Lao Tzu and the ancient Chinese, because they've retained the methods to control your body organs through sound. And I simply have the music that does it, and we teach people how to tune the organ. And one of which is, just like you store worry in the lining of your tummy, you're going to have anger in your liver, because it's the same frequency as anger. And so you can learn your body organ like it's a world within, like you're the universe, you're God, and these are different worlds, your brain, your lungs, and so forth. They feel different. They have different emotions stored in them. And with these techniques, you can kind of go in and see how they're doing and start to tune them up and befriend them, master your body.
So I'm curious. I mean, there's various harmonic scales. I mean, the Chinese is different than the solfeggio, or I can't even pronounce that properly. But the ancient sounds, you that our music are off of the ancient notes. So you've had to explore different scales, both different harmonic scales, to understand that there's different techniques in different cultures of how to tune instruments to work in different frequencies to work with different organs. So that must have been quite an adventure too.
Yes, what I found was fascinating. When you look at the very, very old legends and stories, a lot coming out of South America, but even like in the Sumerian books of Kings, your first written records, they're talking about their ancient history. And they talk about this culture of the shining ones. It sounds to me like from the writings that it's not Homo sapiens, perhaps some elf, fairy, something, I don't know. And they have music that is out of our hearing range a lot. So I'm assuming it's almost like they're more clairvoyant. It has different sound patterns. And as you start getting into written history, like you'll find the Sumerian is like built on 60 base math, and their music is on 60 base math. And they had a lot of music patterns of sixes. The Chinese, five's the magic number. There's five colors, there's five musical notes, there's five harmonic, there's five everything. And all of their music is deduced to patterns of five. The Greeks come in with their tetrachords, and silly me, I couldn't figure that one out forever because I'm interpreting the word chord like we have it today, like bum, bum, bum. And it's not that. It's a chord is just more than one note at a time. So a tetrachord, they're grouping their notes in different patterns of four. And then you come into the Middle Ages, and then you're looking at your scale patterns being grouped into threes, and you have the introduction of the threes. And at this time, you have the Catholic Church coming in with the competition being the Sumerian mysteries, the Egyptian. Okay, the Catholic Church came in, and their competition would have been the Egyptian religion and the Sumerian and the Druids. And these people were all using sound patterns of nature. Their scales were based on the mathematics of a spiral. They were based on their scales all modeled harmonics. If you create, they had a way of doing math differently than we did. And so if you look at the spiral in a star system or in a beehive or in a flower, it's the same shape. And they would reduce it to numbers to their musical scales. So they had these nature-based patterns. And the Catholic Church kind of like poo-pooed it. And in fact, they even almost outlawed music, and it became what they called plain chant, just one tone, no accompaniment, no beginning, no end. Think of like maybe a wind chime or something, early Gregorian chant. And so they outlawed this rich musical heritage, and they came up with the solfeggio scale, which is like, has none of the curves found in nature. And so you can look at scales in terms of how they model religions, how they followed thought. And then you can look at, in my Lost Ways of Time book, I go into this, if different cultures tune on different notes. The ancient Hindus tuned on C. And if you go to an ancient Hindu concert, which you can, they will tune their instruments for an hour. Now, I'm a musician. It takes a minute, 2 minutes max. They're tuning the audience. So they want everybody on the same note to start delivering their healing so that, they get more of a uniform bang for their buck for their music. And so like the Hindus are tuning on a C, Chinese are tuning on an F, Druids are tuning on a D. And then you find these musical notes, of course, are going to equate to different emotions, and they're going to create a different culture and consciousness. And you'll see that their music is going to mirror the great accomplishments and also the downfalls, the challenges that they learned through in that civilization. And you can almost see like a musical note come to predominance, and then the country explores it, makes a playground of this music, if you will. And they have all these great accomplishments around this musical note, consciousness, energy. and then they have a challenge and it falls and the next note comes up, or the next color, or the next emotion. And it unravels like this beautiful lace sequentially. Like, wow.
I guess that's sort of what happens for us humans too. We come in with a certain sound frequency, a certain musical note or set of notes that we explore in this incarnation and play out all the variations of that, exploring both the positives and the negatives and the harmonics and the discords.
Correct.
So I guess in some ways we're exploring the
Yes.
sound frequency that we came through on.
Absolutely. In my Secret Sounds book, back to the work of Sherry Edwards, there's many ways you can go in and look at your body sounds. And I like hers in that she offers free software and everybody can have access to what, how many of what notes they have. Like, I'm a G. Hi. Mm-hmm. And my balancing note is a D. So it's like you can think of a seesaw. And because I have too much G, and that'll be a plus for me at times, but it'll also cause me health issues because I'm not in balance. But it's like a seesaw. So when I'm around the musical note D, my G comes into balance. It's healing. And I find most of my friends that I'm attracted to, they're Ds. So here I'm thinking I'm attracted because of this or that. And I think it's really my body being intelligent and realizing that I have resonance and harmony and balance with this person. And I'm saying exactly what you're saying, only just different words.
Wow, that's fascinating. I had the fortune of working with Marco Pergoznik. He works with sacred dealing with the landscape temple, the angel of every function of like our body. There's a heart chakra in the landscape, and there's a crown chakra, and there's a portal of incarnation, and there's a portal of ascension, and there's a portal of death. And so again, when we go back to the beginning of our discussion, you were talking about the role of sacred sites and how some of them have been shut down harmonically and how some of them can be reactivated harmonically by singing notes, particularly as a group, to raise the frequency, to literally reopen the gate. Well, the same thing with the sacred landscape, that every part of the planet is sacred. And when we tune in and understand what the musical notes of the organs or the role of the landscape for it that matches each organ, then we can do the same sort of healing when the landscape that you were talking about, the body and
great idea
as well.
Yes.
So thank you for that insight. I mean, it's sound all the way up and all the way down. And so what level do we want to play with? We get to choose. So one question I have, and maybe you can help me figure this out, in the whole thing about sound is, if you hit the same note as, say, the crystal glass and it shatters, which is, the royal rife frequency of how to deal with diseases and viruses and cancer cells. You hit the same frequency, those two can't coexist. And that makes sense to me. What about how do we come on the same sort of radio channel or frequency? So, for example, to contact the angelic kingdom, we have to tune into a certain frequency. How is that different than what we just talked of the same note being matched or the same frequency which cancels each other? Is it the harmonics that brings the chord and not the... Am I making sense?
I think so. Just so you know, I kind of get what you're saying because it's breaking up, so I get about every third word. So if I responded appropriately, just say so, and I'll redirect. But I think the angels come in on higher octaves, and with clairvoyance, they're going to have a broader range than our hearing spectrum. But as above, so below. So through octave resonance, that comes down into it's kind of like the bridge. It's like our telephone lines. And harmonics are, think of them like a lasso. When you have a sound, you have an after ripple of sound. and it follows the same mathematics. And you'll find and I learned this from Sherry Edwards, who studied your body, which we look at something like digestion, you can look at it in terms of chemical formula on PubMed. It shows you what the formula is. And then if you put in the cycles per second of each of those chemicals, you'll see that the mathematics work. So in other words, chemistry works when you insert the cycles per second of the elements in the chemical formula, like, wow. And then on top, she says, that digestion's a harmonic chain. It follows the same mathematics as an after ripple. I mean, that makes so much sense. And the same thing like in an organ, you're going to have an average frequency, just like you have an average frequency in a person, but you're going to have an average frequency in an organ, let's say the heart, but then you're going to have right ventricle, left ventricle, this and that. And those other component frequencies are going to be part of that harmonic ripple chain. So in other words, the heart's one big, beautiful sound chord, and the ripple is played throughout it. And I think that you'll find that harmonics, meaning just a sound pattern and its after ripple, it's in our bodies, but I also think it's in time. I think it's in nature. It's harmonics are found in bird chains and wind whistles and the sounds of water. You can hear different harmonics in oceans, and we're unaware. We're kind of catching on to frequencies a lot, but harmonics is a very crucial element in healing. And in fact, when you go back through the Egyptians, they had the Egyptians had a death chant of harmonics to raise the pharaoh to ascension, and it was it's harmonic chains. It's this kind of ripple of sound.
So talk a little bit about the power of overtones. I find that absolutely fascinating. I know with the Peruvian whistling vessels, for example, they come in pairs of 6, 8, 12. They're all different tune, or they're toned differently. But when you blow them, they all create harmonic overtones, which I find very, very powerful. There's something magical in tones. So where did some the Gregorian chants have overtones? Could you say a little bit about overtones?
Well, I don't know. I guess I don't have fact here, but I have theory, just my own personal ideas.
Yeah.
And that is that I believe that we're surrounded by different dimensions and that we are connected through frequencies. And think of it this way. If you had a dot on a piece of paper, it's the first dimension, yet a line is the second. And then if you take that piece of paper and fold it into a paper house, you now have the third dimension. You add time, there's the fourth dimension. So, mathematics, they've shown that we have the fifth dimension, the sixth dimension, the seventh dimension. But let's see what we learn about dimensions by looking at this house. That dot has access to the first, second, third, fourth, fifth dimension. That line does also. Now, it may not be aware of it, but each little frequency to me is like a porthole to a whole nother level. And it's kind of like we wonder how angels could walk amongst us. Well, of course they walk amongst us. We're connected by energy. Just because we don't see or hear it, we are that dot on that piece of paper, and we're all very connected. And I think we don't know how important we are. If someone were to burn that dot and set that fire on paper, that influences all 5 dimensions. So you have bleed through, harmonic ripple through different dimensions. So I believe, and the ancient Egyptians did as well, they would tune yourself in other dimensions. And that's now beginning to become quantum physics. It's called quantum entanglement. And they're showing that in physics, you have an opposite energy. And they were doing that with sound and music in ancient Egypt. And so there's this ancient idea, where sound can go to other dimensions, and that you are then again in those dimensions in some other form. And when you go with beautiful sound and harmonics, that's kind of a way of loving through the time barrier, loving through the dimensions of connecting, of healing in my mind. Because when you start going through harmonics, it's like, again, think of a lasso, or think of like your sound being like a colored water pistol, and you can just see it travel. I don't know if that helps.
No, that helps a lot. That's very, very exciting. So then I guess then telepathy really has to do with being on the same frequency of whatever it is that you're with as well. Then, whether it be a whale or it be a star or it be whatever, those harmonics allow us to literally speak with no language. In other words, from soul to soul or heart to heart.
And I think we have that. I think humans have that, but they've forgotten we have it. In many of my classes, you can put two plants in front of them and ask the room, what does this plant say and what does this plant say? And once they get over being embarrassed about that, they almost always describe them. Everybody in the room will describe the feeling they get from the plant, and it's very distinctive. It's a personality, it's a message, and it's all the same. So it's got a universality to it. And I think that we have more connection with species. We've just forgotten, and we don't trust ourselves. I think it's there.
Yes. Well, we're still breaking up, which is unfortunate. So I think we should maybe wrap it up. But having said that, next month is high-speed internet where I live. I live in the boonies, and we're going to have high-speed internet. And so I'm going to bring you back so we don't have such a sound disjointed discussion. But thank you ever so much. I learned so much, and I'm sure everybody listening to this will, even though it's slightly garbled. So we're going to have you back, and we're going to do this over, and we're going to do some more exploration because we just barely scratched the surface. So thank you ever so much. I'm very excited to meet you and the work that you're doing. All right. Bye for now.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
For quality online wellness products, courses, and services, visit our sponsors, thewellnessstore.ca and the Extraordinary Healing Arts Academy located at thewellnessacademy.ca. To stay in touch, visit us at thewellnessshow.ca. And until next time, be healthy, wealthy, and wise.